The following program is a UWTV classic.
From the University of Washington in Seattle, Upon Reflection with Al Page. Our guest is Bruce Christensen, President and CEO of the Public Broadcasting System.
How has television changed the life of this nation?
That's a question I think I've never been asked before. As I think about it, I guess I'd have to say there are two or three things that come to mind. First, exposure to ideas, places, people that you probably would never, or some people may never see. Public television in particular has been able to breach the barricades of geography and privilege to allow people to go to places like the Metropolitan Opera, to visit the pyramids in Egypt and understand how and in what ways they worked. So it's a shrinking of the world. I guess that's part of what McLuhan was talking about in his global village image. But I guess as important as anything else, it's been the exposure to ideas and events that otherwise you would never see as part of your contemporary experience.
Broadens your horizons.
Well, you go to the change in civil rights, to actually see the dogs and the water cannons used on the marchers, the demonstrators. The other events that stick out in my mind, the 1968 convention, the Democratic Convention in Chicago, to watch Mayor Daley as he kills the microphone. You see raw political power being used in the ways that I think we were, before television, maybe more innocent, less sophisticated, less knowledgeable about the way things really were. And I think television has made us a more knowledgeable, more sophisticated, better educated people.
The people who expose us to the rest of the world, do they have a narrow way of looking at the world because they have to encapsulize it in half-hour programs or one-hour programs?
Well, I would draw the distinction again between public and commercial television. I think the purpose of commercial television is to attract large audiences to advertised product, and they use programs as the means of doing that.
Are you suggesting that PBS doesn't care about the size of the audience?
The size of the audience isn't the primary criteria for a program being on PBS. It's important to us. But it is not the driving consideration. Were it the driving consideration, public television would never have considered putting on the programs with Joseph Campbell and Bill Moyers, which were 6 hours of talking heads about religion, philosophy, myth. I mean, that sort of thing in terms of commercial television fare would be absolutely deadly. What you look for, I think in our terms, is a way to broaden rather than narrow that process. There are limitations that television has, I think, by way of interaction that are probably more inhibiting than a kind of narrowing of perspective. I think the perspective is not necessarily the problem, it's the inability to have any kind of dialogue yourself with the people who are engaged in that dialogue other than a kind of passive one.
I want to get back to that in a moment. Can't you argue that television is primarily a visual medium, and as such it really attracts our emotions and it really doesn't affect our thinking processes?
Sure, television is a visual medium. That's what television means. That's what it stands for. But it engages not only emotion, but also thought process. Again, an example of the Ethics in America program series that will be on public television shortly. Fred Friendly and his people, as they've put together the format for the Media and Society seminars, they did the Constitution, that delicate balance. Fred talks about making the program content so exquisitely difficult and probing, that the only way you can escape is by thinking. The only way you can get out of the dilemmas that are posed is by thinking yourself of what you would do were you in that situation. Now that engages an emotional reaction from the audience as well as a thought reaction, a thought process.
Is he the exception or is he the rule?
I don't think he's the exception in public television. I think public television is the exception in the world of the broader commercial television fare that you see.
Let's go back to the issue of interaction that you raised at the beginning of the show. Isn't there always a barrier between the viewer and the television set?
Oh, sure, always. I guess you get around it, and the media technologists are working to get around it by trying to figure out how you make computers and video material somehow work in tandem, where you can pick your own way to go as you would through a computer game, if you will, where you have the adventure series, you pick the choice, and then the character does whatever the next choice may be. Limited at this point in time. I'm not sure that we've got an answer for television being ever other than a passive medium which may engage thought and emotion on an individual basis. But how you talk back to your television set is a dilemma I think no one has solved.
Let's talk about some specific areas. You made a comment that television has made us look at the political process in a different way than people have ever looked at it before. Has television really enhanced our understanding of the political process, or has it just sent us down the toilet?
Well, I guess if you judged it by the last campaign, you'd have to say television didn't distinguish itself very well, but I don't think the politicians distinguished themselves very well either. The debate then becomes, is television really the leader or simply the mirror of where society is at a particular time?
Or a tool to be used?
Well, a tool to be used, but I think it also reflects back to society what it is and where it is. How engaged are people in general, and how interested are people in politics? Is television to be the provocateur, the means by which, or the medium by which, people begin to engage in the conversation and dialogue about the political process? Probably not. Where does that take place? For the civil rights movement, for much of what went on in that category, it was the church. And the church provided the institution for that kind of conversation and dialogue. In earlier days, it was the town meeting or the town square, schoolhouses, education in general. I think the burden we have pushed now to television, and the burden that folks push to education in general, is probably one that they're not able to bear, not able to cope with, and one that they were never intended or suited to do in the first place.
Well, if you were czar of the national networks during the last election, how would you have changed the television coverage of the election?
Well, I think public television changed the coverage. I mean, if you really wanted, if you were looking for, as a consumer, as a person who was interested in political dialogue, interested in learning more about it, that information was available on public television as well as on various or selected places in the commercial network fare. But you had to find it. The obligation is not on the dumb box itself. The obligation is on the individual and what the individual may choose to do. So if you have 1 million people who have subscribed or have enrolled in credit courses on public television as a means of learning more formally through their educational process, clearly the instrument has the medium or has the capacity to enlighten. It also has the capacity to stupefy and to manipulate. And it depends on what it is you bring as you view, and what it is the people who are doing the programming and buying the commercial time and designing the commercials want to achieve themselves on the individuals watching. I think it's an oversimplification to say that it is the medium's problem or television's problem that creates the dichotomy. I think the dichotomy is in the viewer himself or herself.
That's an interesting point, but let's turn to a group of people who don't have freedom of choice, children. Has television improved the lives of children in this country?
No, I don't think so. I make a categorical statement and then back away from it somewhat, because there are things which television has done for children which have been good. I mean, you look again at how it's used and who's using it. And if you choose to use it for Mr. Rogers, who happens to be one of my television heroes, and one of the few people on television who uses it, who uses the medium for humane and genuinely valuable purposes for fragile egos and fragile psyches, who tries to literally minister to the needs of those kids as they're beginning to figure out what's frightening, what's terrifying, how do I, am I valuable as an individual, as a being. Those programs are very valuable. I think children are served by that. But by and large, television, commercial television, and to some degree public television has not done as much as it ought to or could do for children.
Sesame Street, do we really know whether that's changed children's lives, whether it's not just a high-priced babysitter?
I think the research that we have seen says yes, it has. It's helped both the language skills and the mathematical skills of the kids who watch. What we see is as the kids go through the 4th, 5th, 6th grades, the differences between kids who were heavy users of Sesame Street and those who were not tend to decrease and disappear. So if you're asking whether it's a long-term value, the answer is probably not, but it wasn't intended to be that. It was intended to give those kids who were disadvantaged going into school at least some parity with other kids who were getting those kinds of experiences at home that Sesame Street theoretically or does in real life, I think, bring to disadvantaged kids.
How should parents decide how much television their children should watch? What guidelines should they use?
Well, I can tell you what the guidelines are we use in our family. We're careful about the numbers of hours that the kids watch. We simply don't let them park in front of the television and watch indiscriminately. There are rules about having homework done, and demonstrably so. Not just, yeah, my homework's done, I'm going down and watch television, but there's in our house we make sure that the notebooks are looked at, that the homework is done, and while we don't have as much trouble now as we did at the beginning with kind of sloughing by and running off the homework quickly, it has to be done and done well, and then television is a matter of deciding what are you going to watch? What is it you want to see? Well, we want to watch, you name the show, and we may say yes or we may say no depending on how much we know about the show.
You let them watch commercial TV?
Oh yeah, and we watch it with them as much as we can. MacGyver is one of the favorites that our family has. Jump Street. I mean, those are programs that our kids enjoy and are pretty good programs.
Has watching television lowered the ability of children to think, lowered their attention span?
I guess I'm not probably competent to judge whether statistically it has or not.
But if you watch television, watch MTV, you see short camera pans, bang, 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 quick motion. Is that there for a reason?
I don't know. I can't, again, I'm not able to say that is any more, any greater detriment to someone's ability to concentrate or think about things than to be in a situation where you're out wandering around the southern part of Utah herding sheep, having nothing to do all day but to look at the rear end of a sheep that you're driving up the trail.
That's the control group.
I don't know. It seems to me that the question really revolves around whether or not kids have the capacity to learn, to concentrate on their studies. And most of the indications I see, the kids are doing pretty well by that.
Let's change the subject. Why is there a PBS? What function is it supposed to serve?
PBS serves the function of being, or began as serving a function of being, an alternative to the commercial network fare. In most other countries of the world, public service broadcasting was the standard, and then commercial broadcasting, which was sponsored by advertising, came later on. In the United States, public service television came after commercial television had been established as the dominant medium, and left to public television or educational television, which is what it or how it began, was the use of the medium for a purpose other than commerce. That its primary function was not to deliver eyeballs to advertisers, but its primary function was to deliver good programs to audiences that may want to watch them. And the emphasis was on the quality of the programs and the value of the programs, different from anything that may be available on commercial broadcasting.
With the rise of cable, the Discovery Channel, the Disney Channel, is that mandate still there? Aren't there good substitutes in the private market?
Two things that I think will keep public television alive. One of them has to do with the capacity to plug into the needs of the local communities. Public television is the only locally controlled use of broadcast television anywhere in the world. In the United States, American public television is controlled by people in the local communities. Those people raise the money, decide what programs they want to buy. Even the national programs that are produced by PBS are cooperative ventures. And so you have a connection to that powerful medium in ways that simply don't exist in cable. They don't exist in broadcast television anyplace else. And it adds a strength and diversity that a point of view that simply wouldn't exist otherwise. There's no way for local input, local expression, or use of the medium.
Is that local expression on paper, or does it really exist? Aren't there some movements to strengthen the PBS hand relative to the stations?
There are some moves to try to strengthen the kind of common service or the core service that public television offers nationwide, because I think we all recognize that the competition, which is coming from cable and the kinds of things that cable is offering, is different and has changed the circumstance for public television enough so that we do have to do a better job of getting good quality, high quality programs on the air.
Does that mean more money?
Part of it means more money. Part of it means better use of the funding and the program time we have allotted for us now.
Would you say this is a defensive move, an offensive move?
Yeah.
Both? All of the above?
Sure. It is both offensive and defensive. I think we have a production capacity that we need to protect, and that we need to see produces more high-quality programs that suit public television's primary mission, which is to, make sense out of the world in which you live, to not be tied to the commercial imperative. And I think public television will continue, because it doesn't serve the same kind of imperatives that both cable and broadcast television serve, and that is the kind of commercial fare, something people will watch or are willing to pay for or will pay for.
Talk about the blockbusters on PBS. To what degree are they a result of artistic decisions? To what degree are they the result of political decisions? What's the process involved?
I guess in the 20 years I've been in public television, I can't give you an instance of a political decision having been made for a program to be produced on public television where the program was actually produced. I can give you all kinds of artistic experiences where the artist, Bill Moyers probably is as good as an example right now as anybody, had an idea that he wanted to produce programs engaging interesting people in conversation. And so you end up with a program series called The World of Ideas, 50 half-hour programs.
But his ideas weren't uniformly loved by all station managers.
No, they were probably less loved by the program managers who talked about, what are we going to do with 50 half hours of talking heads? The same thing with the Joseph Campbell series. But despite those, or in spite of those, that kind of reaction, the programs were made and are stunning successes. The poetry series, Voices and Visions, another good example of someone who had an artistic idea. It took him 6 or 7 years to finally complete the series, but That's a function of the way we're financed, not a function of the way we make our decisions with respect to either political or artistic judgment.
Robert McNeil once described public television as a medium where animals copulate with each other and English-speaking people talk to each other, except when the opposite is true. Is this an accurate description of public television?
I think if you are looking for a weakness in public television, it is that we are not producing as much of the programs, high-quality programs ourselves, as we ought to be. We acquire about 10 or 15% of our primetime schedule from overseas. Not necessarily bad, because there are lots of great programs produced there, but it's not my ideal way to run the public television world.
Contributors to public television are often affluent and white, yet the U.S. is becoming a very multicultural society. Will this impact the future of public television? Will this impact the kind of programs that local TV stations will want to show?
Well, I don't think the fact that there are white donors to public television has much to do with whether we import or don't import programs from the BBC or from Australia or wherever we're able to get the programs. I think that's much more a function of what you can afford to put on the air, and a program acquired is about 25% of what a program produced would cost you. So if you're investing something in the order of $500,000 an hour for your primetime program series, they're going to cost you a fraction of that if you acquire them. Public television is, the financing. The real dilemma we face is the kind of underfinancing we've had to struggle with all along. The amazing part of it all is that the programs actually get produced and people have terrific reactions to them. If you judge it based on structure and design and all of the kind of democratic process we go through, people shake their head and walk away and say it just won't work. And you go home and watch a program like The American Experience, where you see, Walker Evans' 1935 photo essays revisited in contemporary terms, and you see the change of the sharecropper over the last 50 years, and what an extraordinary change in the lives of those people has occurred, which Walker Evans or anyone else thought was simply impossible, unthinkable. These people were locked in poverty for eternity. You get some sense about the change in the dimension, and that's part of what all of the process is about.
Again, reflecting the fact that this society is becoming more multicultural, down the road, will we see more PBS shows dealing with Asian matters, dealing with Hispanic matters?
Absolutely.
Anything on the docket?
Well, we're doing a major series on Mexico, just finished. We've got a program, or have had a program on the Philippines. I know that Channel 9 is working on major programs with NHK out of Japan. So, all of that's coming together in ways, I think, partly because of the financing, partly because other public service television organizations in the world also need partners in the production process, and I think that bodes well for us in terms of making our program mix more diverse than it has been in the past. I also think there's some technology changes that will make multiple language uses of programs more accessible to people who don't have as their first language English. That's going on now in several cities where there are bilingual programs, so you get a program in both English and Spanish. And I think we'll see more of that in public television, and frankly more of that in commercial television as well, where you can use the stereo side channel as another opportunity for another language.
What else will we see in the future for PBS down the road, 4 years, 5 years?
I think you'll see a much greater degree of emphasis on education. Public television got away from the kind of educational moniker in the middle 70s. It wasn't chic to be thought of as an educational television station. And I think in many ways we're finding that it is not only chic, but it also is important, and it is a role which commercial television and cable are not likely to fill, and one which public television is well suited to build on, given the base we already have and the connections we have in the educational world. That means programs like the ethics series, which will be used for the first time by many colleges, including the first telecourse that Harvard has ever authorized, will be coming through public television, and those connections to the educational world, I think, will probably be the major thrust you'll see going on in public television over the next 3 or 4 years. There'll be some technology changes. High-definition television is around the corner, whether it's around the corner in the 4 or 5 year time frame or the 7 to 10 year time frame, I'm not sure, but certainly technology will have a lot of impact on how we do our business. Whether or not the telephone companies get into the distribution of television signals, and that we need not invest huge amounts of money in the broadcast side of our institution, where we're spending 20 to 40% of our resources in simply getting the signal transmitted. You plug in a wire that goes to the head end at the telephone company, and everybody gets it, then all of the resources you have end up being able to be used on programming. So there are some things that I think are interesting, challenging, intriguing in the future.
One last question, the future of PBS, bright, bleak?
Bright. Bright and I think encouraging in the kinds of things that will add value to people's lives, value in terms of what they see on television, to making sense out of what's going on in their own environment.
Bruce Christensen, President and CEO of the Public Broadcasting System. Upon reflection.
To see more UWTV classics, visit uwtv.org/classics.